the state's nonpartisan Little Hoover Commission. As you know, they do incredible work, and I'll let Pedro talk about the kind of work they do, but I do want to thank him in advance for being so gracious with his time. He has been on our TV programs and radio programs in the past and shared some really valuable public policy insights with us. Today, we're going to be talking about equitable regional development, and really talks about how we kind of equalize economic development between the coast and the valley. The coast has done well in the economy. The valley's lagged a little behind. And so that was the focus of this Little Hoover Commission report that the chairman's going to talk about. But before that, I would like to ask Chairman Nava to kind of talk a little bit about the Little Hoover Commission, who's it made up of, and what's its charge. Well, so welcome, Pedro.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. And hello to everybody who has taken the time to join us today for this conversation. But before I start, I do want to emphasize just what an honor and a privilege it is to be a part of this Maddy series in the Institute. And I think it's particularly important, given the current state of political affairs in this country, that we be reminded that people like Ken Maddy played a significantly important role in the examination of government, providing services, evaluating the work that is to be done by government, encouraging bipartisan conversations about solutions that everyday people are confronted with as they try to deal with the complexities of modern life. I had the benefit and privilege of serving as a legislator in the Assembly for the Santa Barbara Ventura area. And, you know, I found that as a Democrats don't own all the good ideas, that there was plenty to be learned and plenty of benefit to be obtained by having a conversation with Republicans and folks who are declined to state from their political perspectives, and to just work to find solutions, find things that are answers for people who are sometimes overwhelmed by the services that they're looking for. And so, you know, what Ken Maddy represents to me is embracing all people, all different ideas, and searching for the best on every opportunity that you can. But as for the Little Hoover Commission, some people know about us, some people don't, but we are we've been characterized as nonpartisan. We certainly are bipartisan by statute in such a way that the membership of the commission must be balanced between those who have no party preference, Democrats and Republicans. So as an example, I'm a Democrat, I'm the chair. The vice chair must be a member of either the Republican Party or no party preference. And I think some of the strength that we've demonstrated over the years is coming up with reports and examinations of government services that have been almost universally adopted unanimously by all members of the commission, because it's important, again, to embrace different perspectives to come up with the best ideas that you can. So there are 13 of us. There's members that are from the Senate, some from the Assembly, and there are public members who are appointed as well by both the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor's office. So we have a very dynamic organization. Sometimes I've jokingly characterized it as herding cats, but they're certainly the smartest cats that I've ever had anything to do with. And so the topics that come up for consideration, our responsibility is a review of executive branch operations. And that means all of the agencies, as well as what goes on over in the governor's office. We are, by statute, charged with the responsibility for reviewing all of the reorganizations that are proposed by the executive branch. We take ideas from the public, from the legislature, from the governor's office, and from commissioners. And the process is that as a group, we'll discuss the various ideas that are suggested to us. If there's a consensus, then we direct staff to come up with a sort of a position paper, an analysis of the important issues on that topic. We bring that back to the commission. They either say yay or no, and then we move forward. We conduct hearings. We have subpoena power. As far as I know, we've never had to use it. We've had vigorous participation from both agencies and witnesses that come forward to offer their expertise and to help us craft recommendations. Then once the report is complete and the recommendations are solidified, we distribute that to the legislature, the governor's office, as well as a long list of other interested parties who have signed up to receive our emails, along with a general distribution to the press. The other thing that we started doing differently a few years ago is, because of my background as an attorney, having done a lot of trial work and being a member of the legislature, I thought it was important that we also sell the report. And by that, I mean that once we can complete a report, we make appointments with the various committees over in the legislature, as well as members who are available, to sit down and talk to them about what the report says, how we compile the information, who we talk to, what our recommendations are, and then we offer our support if legislation is proposed, so that we will testify, write letters, offer testimony, and appear at committee hearings to help move the legislation forward. You know, a very recent example of that is, some of you may be familiar with the modifications to the Bagley-Keene Act, and with respect to remote meetings. Now, under Bagley-Keene, as well as the Brown Act, if you are a commissioner or a member of that body and you wanted to participate remotely, you had to identify a location, and it had to be open to the public, so that if I wanted and I couldn't attend a meeting in Sacramento, and I had it in my home, you could show up, knock on my front door, and I'd have to let you in, and we'd have coffee and we'd conduct a meeting. There have been changes to Bagley-Keene. It is much more flexible, and we think that what will result in is what we found during COVID, as we did remote meetings. Get a higher level of member participation, members of commissions and boards. You had a higher level of public participation. And let me say, for those individuals who require special assistance, you know, it's tough to get to Sacramento to show up for a meeting. It's much more accessible for people who have special needs if they can do it via video. So we found a higher level of public participation, and we found that it was much less expensive. It was much nicer on the budgets for the organizations if they did not have to come up to Sacramento, rent a hotel room, take an Uber or whatever from the airport to go testify for 6 to 7 minutes. So that's one of the things that we've done recently that we saw a change.
By the way, if I can interrupt there for a second, Chairman Nava, I mean, that really has a big impact for the Valley. I mean, that's one of the things that people have talked about, that the Valley lacks representation in Sacramento. One part of it is the ability to go to the Capitol, take time off to go to the Capitol. This gives people in the Valley a voice.
Yeah, and it does. And I just think part of, you know, democracy with a little d is to provide as much of an opportunity for people to be heard. There is a tremendous amount of wisdom that is imparted to legislative bodies and boards and commissions by people who are able to share their life experiences about what it takes for them to try to navigate things the way that they are. When I was in office, the work that I did that I was the most proud of was everyday constituents who were just sort of engaged in complicated transactions with government. So, you know, one of the instances was, I had a father call me up. His son was in the military. His driver's license was going to expire. There was no way for him to renew it. There wasn't a means by which he could do it. He was going to come home. He would have no license. He wouldn't be able to get around. And so we called the DMV and explained what it was, and they figured out how to get it done. Another time, we had a truck driver who had his commercial license hadn't been issued. He had a job waiting for him, and if he didn't get it within a few days, he was going to lose that job. And so we prevailed on DMV again on that one, and he got his license, he got his job, and went on his way. So So the ability of people to access decision makers in the political process is what I think helps to ensure confidence that government is oriented in your interest in trying to provide services for you.
Yeah, well, one of the things that's very clear is between you and the LAO and others, it really can provide some nonpartisan, bipartisan analysis of public policy issues, which, as you said, it seems to be lacking a bit these days. So let's turn our attention to what we're going to talk about today specifically, and that is equitable economic development across California. And one thing I wanted you to talk about a little bit was the regional disparities between, let's say, the Central Valley and the coast. I mean, how big a disparity is that?
Yeah, well, they're significant and they're dramatic. And what we have seen is they have grown further apart over time. And so, for example, we looked at things and found in the report. You take, everybody I think is familiar with Visalia, and you know where Menlo Park is. So in 1970, the economic prospects in those communities were very similar, but by 2021 they were dramatically different. For example, the average salary in Menlo Park was the second highest in the United States, and half the population had college degrees. In Visalia, by 2021, they had the second lowest percentage of college educated in the US and one of the lowest average salaries. So those kinds of disparities just build on each other. And what happens, obviously, in communities is there are fewer resources, and particularly in areas that may need them the most. If you are, I had the good fortune to spend a number of years in Fresno. I worked with the Fresno Employment and Training Commission, FETC, when some of you may remember Sharon Levy was a supervisor, and she was also on that board. And I benefited from 4.5 years working as a deputy district attorney in the DA's office. And so what you realize is that areas that have a large number of low-paid jobs don't afford the same kinds of amenities that a place that's on the coast, for example, would have. And so economic growth and development is then drawn to places like the coast because the quality of life seems to be better. In some ways, it's better, and salaries follow that same kind of improvement. And you then have more revenue to have better parks, more public amenities, things that people can go enjoy and entertain. Whereas if you live someplace that doesn't have the same revenue, it's just a struggle to get that done.
I want to kind of follow up on that point, and that's exactly what we've seen. I mean, one of the reasons I'm a person who kind of advocates for parks and trails and those kinds of things, and it's not just because it's a nice, amenity for the community. It's an economic driver. People, with high-paying jobs and good positions don't have to choose your community if it doesn't have all the amenities that they expect. Yeah. And so it's part of the economic equation to have these kinds of things. And your report seems to kind of spell that out. The thing I think your report spells out, which is very interesting, is that it's not endemic that the Valley always has to lead or follow the coast. There was a time when the economic situation in the Valley and the economic situation on the coast was similar, but it's diverged radically over the last 40, 50 years. But it wasn't always so. And so that's, I think, was kind of interesting that I saw in your report. One of the things you talk about in your report is something called tradable sectors. Mm-hmm. And you say they're a major contributor to jobs. Can you talk a little bit about what tradable sectors are?
Yeah, that was a new term to me, and I suspect it probably is to others as well. And what tradable sectors means is, I suppose you can better define it by looking at what the opposite is, and that is when you don't have a tradable sector. A tradable sector means that what you generate and produce in your community or in your region is then eligible and likely to be exported outside of your region, which actually generates more revenue and job opportunities than if you are making something and selling it in your neighborhood. So if you are able to encourage industry in your region that creates a product that has to go outside of the region. I'll give you an example for Fresno, for agriculture, right? You generate a tremendous amount of food. You do very little in terms of the processing of that food.
Which is the value added.
And that's right, because the processing of the food is what adds the value, right, to the item itself. And it also has a whole series of ancillary jobs that support the food processing. So, for example, in an agricultural area, you're going to plant, you're going to harvest, but if you're not processing, you're loading that into a truck or a train, and you're shipping it outside of your region to another region that enjoys the benefit of the jobs associated with processing that food and the additional value of processing that food. So you run up against, although you generate a tremendous amount of money in farming, you lose all of the other money that is related to the rest of that supply chain. And so it does not benefit the communities. Those are the jobs that you have. They're agriculture and they're important. You have ancillary jobs that support agriculture. You have tractors fertilizing pipes that are needed for irrigation. There's a whole economic system. But if you lose the ability to expand that with higher paid, more tech demanding jobs, if you don't have a thing like food processing. So the notion of tradable sectors ties back into making a product that you sell outside your region because it generates more revenue.
Now, I want to ask you about maybe the silver lining of the pandemic. It seems to, would that possibly help improve the Valley's economic prospects because of the increase in remote work, the low cost of housing in the Valley relative to the coast? Is that what you're seeing? Do you think is that resulting in better paying jobs for the Valley? Is some of that work migrating to the Valley?
Well, some of it is, but it's a double-edged sword. Now, we did experience in the pandemic the rise of people working from home because there was no real alternative, and it has become, quite frankly, the norm. We have seen in urban areas that people who learned how to work from home received a real benefit from having done that. They don't have the commute. They don't have the same kinds of pressures on childcare. You have also then seen, for example, the restaurants that help provide services to people when they commuted. They did very well. So you're in the city, you got a restaurant, everybody has to come downtown, you sell sandwiches, you're doing okay. But with the COVID and the pandemic, what you then found was that the shops that are around the communities where you live are doing better. So it's a trade-off in the urban sector that has lost the jobs as compared to some of the communities that have benefited from the COVID. But then the other thing that I think everybody experiences, you've also seen a rise in housing costs in communities where people are now working at home. So you win on some and you lose a little bit on the other. But there's no question that there's going to be continued changes. Now, one of the good aspects for the Valley is you've got UC Merced, which has some extraordinary programs that are very forward-looking, that can provide opportunities for people in the Valley. And thank goodness that you have UC Merced, because that's going to be a real economic driver for the area.
Well, one of the things too is they've also got the ACE train that connects the North Valley with San Jose and Silicon Valley. You could argue, and people have argued, that having high-speed rail will connect Fresno and Bakersfield more with other parts of California that will then make a commute possible. I mean, it's particularly in some of these hybrid jobs where you only have to come in maybe once or twice a week.
Right.
Maybe that's a viable option. Right. Certainly, I'm from the East Coast. The 1.5 hour commute on the train, from Connecticut into New York is a pretty common commute. And so a little bit novel maybe for California. It's in a car in California, but maybe we can get people to get on a train. Let me ask you this. There's a quote in your report from a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution who advised the commission that, quote, "You can have economic growth without inclusion, but you can't have inclusion without growth," unquote. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I think what he means is that if you continue to provide prosperity to the top 1% or top 10%, you leave tremendous numbers of people behind. And I'm reminded of a story about Henry Ford, and it was talking about why he paid his workers as much as he did, and it was a lot, at the time. And he said, I want them to have the money to buy the cars they're building. So if you don't have economic prosperity that reaches throughout the levels in your community, then people are going to be denied the money in order to keep that system prosperous. It works best if the advantages and the opportunities are shared with all of those from the top to the bottom of the economic ladder. Now, I spent a number of years, as I said, working with the Fresno Employment and Training Commission when the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act, or CETA, money was made available. And it was a lesson that we learned is if you have somebody who never really had to live their life with an alarm clock, you've got a problem. And we found there were people who just didn't understand what the alarm clock was because they didn't have to go to work. They didn't have jobs. They didn't go to work. That then became a part of their lifestyle, and it creates an economic drag on the community. The more people you have working, making decent wages so they can buy the food, the clothes, and pay for the housing that they need, the healthier the community is going to be overall. And so that means with inclusion, you're going to have to take extra steps to bring folks in who have not historically been a part of that process, if only because it's good for you too.
Yeah, the argument is that a job is the best poverty program. And I will date myself because when I was in graduate school, I did an economic analysis of CETA. So I'm dating myself. That goes back a long ways. And that's in your same report, you cited the Brookings Institution. They identified 5 components that underline economic success in a region. And one of them we already talked about was tradable sectors. Another issue that they talked about was talent. What about talent?
Well, this again goes back to, if you've got somebody who has lived their whole life without an alarm clock, they're not going to be a terribly valuable employee. There's all sorts of things that they're not going to know how to do. And what industry does and what businesses do when they make a decision about where to locate a plant or how they're going to expand, a significant part of the decision making is, do we have people in that location that we're going to be able to hire and put to work with, from their perspective, a minimum investment in training. You want to have people who have experience and who are educated and who have the ability to do the job that is germane to that particular business. So if they look at the educational level, if they look at the attainment level, if they look at the talent pool in a community and they find it to be lacking, they're going to either look someplace else or they are going to realize that the investment is much more expensive than they had initially assumed, that there will be training costs. They're also going to want to take a look at, what does the community college in that community offer with respect to training? What are the organizations that can help train the talent pool in order to get them ready to go to work, assuming they're not ready yet? That's
one of the things that we hear is that unemployment rate is historically been fairly high in the Valley. But when you talk to business people, you say, listen, we have the jobs, we just don't have the people that can fill those jobs in the Valley. So really, one of the reasons for the Valley's poor economic standing is that lack of knowledge, skills, and expertise to do those jobs. I know there's been a big emphasis and push on addressing that with the community colleges and others, but that is an issue. Another thing Brookings talked about, was innovation. Can you talk a bit about innovation and why that's important? That's something that underlies economic success in a region?
Well, I think one of the things that is on most people's mind lately is the whole issue of artificial intelligence. And what is the role that artificial intelligence is going to play, and how is it going to be applied throughout the various sectors? So innovation is also an important aspect of what is the character of your community. Is the community seen as a place where people who have new ideas want to come and spend time and invest? Do they feel comfortable? Do they live in a community, or is the community such that it encourages innovation, that it is forward looking, that the organizations in that community, like the community colleges, like the community-based organizations, like the governance, right? Your elected officials on the city, the county, do they indicate that they believe that innovation is an important element of the character of the community? Because
it sounds like you're talking about entrepreneurial kind of spirit or that sense.
Yeah, are you seen as a community that makes it difficult to get a permit? Is it hard where you live in order to build something? Are the financial institutions in your community such that they encourage innovation and investment? And
one of the things I'm sure you may have read about this, Chairman Nava, is what happened locally here with an organization called Bitwise, which was starting up, helping entrepreneurs start up their companies, and was kind of an incubator. They had some financial issues, which is it's certainly unfortunate for the employees and investors involved, but it also has had kind of a negative effect, I think, on the community, because it's just like, oh, we tried and we put so much effort into this and it didn't work out. Now, I do think that there is a lot of work being done by the mayor and others to change that narrative. But that was a really unfortunate thing, I think, frankly, for the community. I mean, not everything is positive. Sometimes you have mistakes and things happen, but innovation is obviously very important. The other thing that Brookings mentioned was infrastructure. And by the way, and I should mention this about infrastructure, and people don't realize this, but obviously internet capacity is very important, how well connected your city is. And I will just point people to Chattanooga, Tennessee is viewed as the model for connectivity for a city. The amount of money they've spent investing in that, and the projections are they're going to do very well financially because they've invested so much in that type of infrastructure. I know some of that is happening here in the Valley as well, but when I talk a little about the importance of infrastructure,
yeah, well, success. And it's funny you mentioned Chattanooga, because I have a friend who went to work in Chattanooga for some time ago, and went to go visit him. And, I was talking about like how in my home, I've got like, at the time, 250 megabits, right, coming through my system. Oh my God, I was so happy. Stuff loaded up quickly. And he goes, oh, really? Watch this. And so he turned his stuff on, and it was 1,000 megabits coming through his home system. So yeah, Chattanooga made the decision. They wanted to be that place, right, in Tennessee and for the country, where they made it welcome. They welcomed innovators. They made all of the infrastructure, the internet, government services, and an attitude that if you come here, we're going to help you put your stuff together. That is the kind of environment that entrepreneurs and business developers look to, because it makes life simpler for them. They don't want to spend months and months and years getting permits to put together something that shouldn't take that long, because there's all the revenue that is lost while you're not operating that you then have to try to recoup one way or the other. And so it is important to have that kind of what you identified as the infrastructure, whether it be the internet, whether it also be government services.
And we're going to get into that in a second. I want to ask you one thing I would say, about this area is transportation. With most of the counties having self-help taxes that build the highway systems within the communities, they've done a pretty good job, at least in terms of autos and trucks. I would argue they need to have a more multimodal system that offers more alternatives to folks, and the importance of improving 99, but also the importance of finishing high-speed rail, all part of infrastructure. And you did mention governance, because Brookings did as well. Brookings said that was one of the other issues you had to have for economic success. So what about governance?
Well, I'll tell you, and I don't know how far this extends into other areas of government operation. I live in Santa Barbara, and anybody who knows anything about Santa Barbara, who tries to build anything here, they're not happy. It takes an extraordinarily long period of time, too many different departments that you've got to knock on doors to pull your paperwork together. So governance is in large part an attitude. So does your mayor, do your city council people, do your board of supervisors, is the first thing that they try to think about is the yes rather than the no? Is the first thing that they want to do is facilitate the growth and development of job training, of job placement, of recruitment, for qualified people? I'll give you, it's sort of an interesting example. Besides this, many, many years ago, I sat on the California Coastal Commission, and I was approached by the then mayor of Oxnard because there was a housing development in Oxnard that they were supporting. And it was high-end housing, and it wasn't beachfront housing. It was a different scenario. But what he explained to me, and it made absolutely perfect sense, he goes, we have plenty of low-income housing in Oxnard. What we do not have is high-income housing. And he said, we need the high-income housing to get people to move to our community that have disposable income who will make demands for amenities. And once that happens, the entire community will benefit from it because there will be more money available for different things. So in your governance, if you are an industry that's looking to expand or just to even get a start, do you have the sense from talking to people that are decision makers that they want to help you get to where you're going to go? That's a big part of it.
We had a conversation last week on downtown revitalization, and a person who attended in the audience made a comment about Mayor Dyer. He said, he's setting up. He wants to set up a comedy club in downtown Fresno, and I guess he has a chain of these in California. And he said the difference between talking to folks in San Francisco and people in Fresno, he said it was night and day. When he went to try to develop something, open up a comedy club in San Francisco, all these regulatory hurdles and problems and just, very difficult. When he called Fresno, he literally got a call back from the mayor saying, what can we do to help? And it's been expedited. So he's talking about opening up a comedy club in Fresno in the next year.
Yep.
And he said he just really appreciated how responsive the government was to the kinds of things he was trying to do. I think that's very important. It can be a turn on or a turn off, as it were.
Yeah. Well, when I was in office and Oxnard was part of my district, we got a notice that they were going to have an unveiling ribbon cutting for a parking garage downtown. And my staff are going like, oh, well, what's that, right? It's not a hospital. It's not. And I said, no, stop and think for a minute. It's a parking garage. Why do you need a parking garage? Because people are driving downtown and they need a place to park. I said, you may not think it's important. This is a significant advance for downtown Oxnard, where historically people didn't want to go. But I said, we're going to go with them and to celebrate what is a clear signal that the economic future for downtown Oxnard has just gotten better. That's what you have to sort of, you see, you elevate the everyday things so that you can accomplish those things that are great.
Yeah, that's a great point. One thing you note in your report is that Fresno, Stanislaus, and Kern County have some unique economic strengths and opportunities that give us a bit of a competitive advantage. So can you describe some of the regional opportunities that you think that with the right investment and leadership could serve as future growth engines and sources of, high-paying, good jobs?
Yeah, well, for example, we were just talking about in agriculture, you plant the food, you harvest the food, and then you send it away. So Fresno could very, very readily embrace advanced agricultural production, what they call green manufacturing, and business services. You take a look at an area like Fresno, where the land expenses are not as significant or high as they're going to be in a larger urban area. So it makes a perfect place for second office operations. Cost of housing isn't anywhere near what it's likely to be in some of the coastal cities. So you can attract people to that. You look at the strengths that are already in place. So for example, Bakersfield and Kern, right? Now, we're all focused on, electric vehicles and the electrification of the entire system. But there are people and companies in that area that historically have been involved with oil production, oil manufacturing, and oil, all part of the oil business. They have to be a part of coming forward as well. So you take a look at look at industries that are similar to oil production. So renewable biofuels is an area where you could take the experience and training of folks from those industries and transition them, right? Also, carbon capture is an area that is going to continue to grow. Storage, advanced manufacturing, all related to energy. So you don't tell people, oh, guess what? We're going to electricity. So you're going to have to go do something else all by yourself. You use the experience, the education, and the training and the dedication of people who have lived their lives in those industries to move over to a new kind of work, but still has a relationship to the things that they know. I read a book not too long ago. It was interesting. There was a woman who had been in one of our ambassadors whose family came from coal. And she said when the coal industry had problems and those folks had to go out and find jobs in convenience stores or in other kinds of industries, in their core, they still related to coal. They were proud of their work with coal. They understood that coal played an important part in the growth and prosperity of America. And so you don't take people who have experience in other industries and deny them the grace that is associated with that. So for Stanislaus, right? Stanislaus could be oriented towards bioindustrial manufacturing, again, biofuels, food manufacturing, modular prefab housing, agricultural equipment and manufacturing. It's those sorts of things. You look at what it is you're doing now, consider it in terms of how you become a part of trading, what it is that you can grow into, and then move in that direction.
By the way, I want to encourage people, if you want to put questions in the chat room, we'll start asking those. So if you have any questions, please think about doing that. I want to ask you, though, while people are thinking about what questions I might want to ask, is this whole issue of balancing growth and inclusion. And be a bit of a contrarian here and say, are these two inconsistent goals? Are they compatible goals to have both growth and economic inclusion?
Well, the short answer is yes, and because it has to be. I think from a social justice perspective, using revenue, right? You're going to get money from the state of California, and you're going to get money from the federal government. And part of the objective of what that money represents is expanded opportunity to engage in bringing along people who have historically been left behind. Because we know that leaving people behind brings with it a whole host of other issues that at one point or another, the community has to deal with. And it's much better for everyone involved if you bring them along so that they are productive participants in your society and in your culture. So there is a cost to leaving people behind. You may not think there is, but I think the folks that are participating in this have enough experience to understand that there is a cost to leave people behind. One way or another, you're going to have to bear the expense of helping them out when they need help. There are other parts of our system that become engaged with folks who are involved in activities that aren't sanctioned, that people don't want them to do. Remember, I was a deputy DA in Fresno for 4.5 years, so I saw a little bit of that. So I think they go together, and it is a concept that you in Fresno have already put in place with the organization that I think you're going to give me the name of in just
it's the Drive Initiative. Right. That's in Fresno. So I wanted to ask you about that. And you cite that as one of the examples of a successful regional economic initiative. But there are others around the state as well. There's the effort down in Bakersfield. There's Stanislaus 2030. There's a number of, even in the Valley. What do you see as kind of the common elements of these successful regional economic development initiatives?
I think that the aspects that are similar is a recognition that it's not easy. That's the first part. You're not just going to sort of fall into this and everything is going to work out fine. I think it takes a special mix of community representatives who are willing to listen. Sometimes you got to be willing to shut up so that you can listen. And it takes a group of people who, from the very beginning, and sometimes it takes a while to build up trust, but who are, it's sort of interesting what I said at the beginning of this session about the Maddy Institute and what Ken Maddy represented. It takes people who are willing to respect other people's points of views and have a conversation about it. It is that dynamic. It's in order for it to be successful, you have to have the kind of leadership that sets the tone so that everybody gets a chance to speak, everybody has a chance to be heard, and that ideas are treated respectfully and that they have worth. And then you can talk about what it is that everybody can contribute to make it happen.
You know, I'd see a note here in the chat about Tulare County, and saying, don't forget about us. There's things happening in Tulare County, and which is very true. And one of the comments they made, and I've seen this, in the newspapers, it's becoming a bit of a shipping hub because of where it's situated. What do you think the best thing Tulare County can do to improve its economy the next few years, next 5 years? And then, by the way, part of that ties into this, which you can talk about in a minute, the state's the Community Economic Resilience Fund. How can Tulare kind of build on, its emerging success in shipping and logistics?
Well, there's a lot of aspects to shipping and logistics, and a big part of that, which can sometimes be a thorny issue to deal with, are the environmental constraints. I grew up in Fontana, California, and one of the most recent conflicts is how Fontana has developed into this huge warehouse hub with fulfillment centers and the diesel truck traffic that accompanies that kind of development. One of the answers, I think, at some time in the future is going to be vehicles that have fewer emissions. You're also going to have to coordinate very closely with the community to figure out the best kinds of protections possible, because those folks that are living right up against the back of the warehouses where there are dozens and dozens of trucks have legitimate concerns about the air quality and how it's going to impact their kids. But again, the issue with fulfillment centers and transport is you got to examine how many of those jobs are going to be high road jobs, high quality jobs, high paying jobs. So on the one hand, it does provide employment for people who don't necessarily have a particularly high skill level. It does take skill, but they don't necessarily have to be college educated. And so you have to make sure that you're not repeating the process where what you are encouraging are minimum wage jobs with high turnover and with very little promotional opportunities for folks. It would make sense to, as you develop the transport in that community, to take a look at how else you can build those tradable benefits so that there's other revenue coming to you from outside your neighborhoods.
Can you talk a little about this state Community Economic Resilience Fund? I mean, what impact is it going to change the narrative? I mean, the state has always talked a good game, frankly, about regional economic development, but hasn't really done a lot. Yeah. It seems like this is different. There seems to be something backing up the talk, and there's some significant money here. I think it was, I'm trying to remember the exact number. It was, I don't know if I can find it quickly.
Got about $9 billion.
$9 billion, yeah, it's a lot of money. You start talking billions, now we're talking some serious money. So, is this going to make a difference?
Well, look, I think what Governor Newsom did with this that was different was identifying the money, that state money, as well as some of the COVID money from the feds, creating regions in the state that the money will be directed to, And the other part of it that I think was really wise is it's structured in such a way that it creates partnerships within the recipient communities in order to get the money and then leverage it for other sources of revenue. So you've got the SURF, which is the Community Economic Resilience Fund. They put $600 million in state money for inclusive regional economic development, planning, and implementation. In other words, the state understood that if we were going to move forward with economic development in parts of the state that have not shared in the benefits as other places, you have to pay for the planning. Oftentimes, I know from my experience with community-based organizations, if they don't have money for planning, they're never going to be able to leverage up anything. And so they have a lot of wishes, but they don't have the infrastructure in order to pursue what they need and in order to put it to work. So that $600 million is administered by the Labor Workforce Development Agency, OPR, and GoBiz, right? So they sent $5 million to the 13 regional partnerships to get them going. There's here's the $5 million to start your planning.
One of the things people have said is, $5 million, that's not that much money in the scheme of things. But I would remind people that when Governor Schwarzenegger had the California partnership with the San Joaquin Valley, that was via an executive order. That was $5 million. And I have to tell you, because I was there when it was happening, it did have a big impact. So people can say, it's only $5 million. Actually, that can have a big impact.
Well, but it's only for planning.
And it's just for planning, right?
Keep that in mind. It's not $5 million for everything. It's it is the money that organizations use to come together to have the conversations about what do we need to do, how do we need to do it, and how are we going to go after it.
I was just thinking, it's kind of funny that it's only $5 million. I'm thinking, wait a second, you could do work in this area in government for a certain amount of time, and $5 million, that's nothing, budget dust. And then you think, wait a second, that's a lot of money, actually. Someone was asking about the opportunities created to bring the best employees in by having more green space paths and outdoor recreation. Boy, a person's singing my song. Why are those amenities important to attracting high quality and retaining a high quality workforce?
Well, I think part of that has to do with, we all want to have pleasant experiences with nature. And I think for many people, they don't have the dream job like you, Mark. They've got jobs that are demanding. They might have bosses who are less than understanding. They are going to have pressures that are not pleasant experiences. And so by being able to, you go to a park, let's say, for example, you're married, you've got, 2 kids, and they want to go see a movie. You have some idea what that's going to cost you, right? Your adult ticket is probably going to be $12 each. The children are going to be $9, maybe. The popcorn is going to be for the little one, the probably $7.50. The soda is going to be $4.75. So you're out a fair amount of money for a couple of hours at a movie theater, as compared to being able to go to a park that has recreational equipment for your children, that has a place where you can barbecue whatever it is that you're doing, and you can have an afternoon outside with your family for a relatively small amount of money. That makes a difference in people's lives. The ability to get outside the 4 walls of your home or the fenced area of your yard, as nice as that could be, but those are the sorts of things that elevate the experience of a community, and that draw people to it, as well as other things.
We were this is a number of years ago, but we were recruiting a faculty member from Vanderbilt, which was, it's a great school. And he was interested in the Craig School of Business. Then his wife came here and she said, we're not moving there. Yeah. And one of the reasons was the lack of amenities, and people, high quality people, just they can live in a nice river. Why would they choose to live in an area that doesn't have those amenities? I think one of the problems that we have here, one of the challenges we have here, is we're competing with Santa Barbara, Monterey, San Diego. I mean, we're not competing with Racine, Wisconsin. And so that's a tough thing. That's tough competition. So you better come to the game with something. And I think one of the things that we have to realize is, if we want to attract people, we have to have those kinds of things that attract people that want to be here. And frankly, I moved here 37 years ago from Connecticut, and it was a bit of a culture shock, I will admit. But it's, most of Fresno is not, frankly, Route 99. Most of it is north. It's relatively new. It looks more like Orange County. But people don't see that, unfortunately. And so it has this reputation that's undeserved. But yeah, those kinds of amenities and doing those kinds of things, and there are plenty here if we just would market them better, I think, can really attract a high quality workforce and help us in terms of economic development. We're wrapping up here in the last few minutes. I just want to see if are there any other comments you'd like to make, Chairman Nava, before we wrap this up?
Well, what I would suggest that people who are interested in this report, if you just go to the Little Hoover Commission website, you could Google Little Hoover and it'll take you to the links. And if you go, we have a place where you can access all of the reports that we have done, and you can find this particular report on economics. And I would suggest one of the things I did, you take a look. There's Appendix 1 in our report, and we've got really wonderful staff who have done a great job putting together all this material. But Appendix 1 lists all of the departments, all of the agencies, and all of the funding sources that have been made available through the governor's activities and sort of coordinating the monies. And you will be surprised. There's almost like 4 pages which is also part of the problem sometimes. Sometimes there are so many agencies that are engaged that it makes it a little more complicated. But you can go to Appendix 1 of this report. It'll outline, it lists for you the amount of money that the agency has, the purpose of that money, and the objective. And I think it'll help focus attention on opportunities.
Well, I want to thank Chairman Pedro Nava from the state's Little Hoover Commission for spending some time with us, spending a lot of time with us, explaining this new report they have on equitable regional development. Thank you. This is going to be, by the way, probably our last. This is, I think, our last Maddy Associate webinar for the year. So we'll be back in the new year. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you again, Chairman Nava, for being with us today. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.